Chapter 1. The Alpha's Vigil. The fear was always a cold whisper, never a roar. Caleb Thorne, Alpha of the Obsidian Pack, didn't feel the comforting weight of his title. He felt the crushing solitude of it. He stood in the stronghold's nerve center, a dimly lit bunker hidden beneath centuries of granite and earth. The air was thick with the scent of ozone and old parchment. He stared at the holographic map displaying the vast territory. Every green flicker represented a ward, a silent promise of protection he'd sworn to uphold, a promise that had cost him everything. Still, his eyes fixed on the distant, pale blue light marking the Shadow Creek homestead.
Anya.
The name was a prayer and a wound. All at once. His immediate goal was simple: confirm the passive wards around her isolated home were holding strong. He had to justify his 16 years of sacrifice, the public rejection that still scarred the Pack's history, the cold distance he maintained, the deep ache of the empty space beside him. He did it because the prophecy demanded it, because the power of the Trinity must stay hidden until they could wield it, or the Umber Coven would find them. Status report on Sector 7 perimeter wards. Caleb's voice was a low, steady rumble, stripped of any emotion that might reveal the tumultuous sea beneath. His beta, Marcus, a broad man with eyes that held too much worry, clicked keys on the console. Green on all passive energy signatures, Alpha. They're stable. Deep cycle magics are cycling perfectly.
Green.
A meaningless color, Caleb thought. It only meant the walls hadn't cracked yet. Truth be told, the most critical ward wasn't the magic fence. It was the one built into Anya's heart, her hatred for him. She believed he betrayed her love for power, which meant she would never willingly return to the stronghold, keeping the triplets safe and far from the ancient vampire threat. Caleb's gaze drifted to a small, worn photograph tucked into his utility vest. A younger Anya, laughing, her beta mark pulsing with light before he tore their world apart. Was it worth it? He often wondered. Is this cold, lonely life the true cost of protection? This memory was an open loop, the regret over his action, yet the certainty of his reason for it, constantly looped inside him. Meanwhile, the silence of the bunker was suddenly lacerated by a high-pitched, insistent chime. Not a red alert, something sharper, more specific. Marcus frowned, tapping his console. Alpha, this isn't the perimeter grid. It's the independent long-range network. It's from the Seeker. The Seeker was a mysterious, neutral source Caleb paid exorbitantly for data the Pack couldn't access. Without warning, the screen flared with a single line of cryptic text. Energy spike. Unnatural source. Forest near the rift. Caleb's heart didn't skip a beat. It dropped like a stone, cold and heavy. Pinpoint the coordinates. The coordinates that snapped onto the screen were not the vast, empty woodlands. They were less than a quarter mile from Shadow Creek Homestead. The energy wasn't fading. It was pulsing. What followed was a terrifying certainty that settled over Caleb, a predator's instinct screaming that the time he had bought was running out. He had to know exactly what the spike meant because if it was the hidden gift, they were already compromised. Chapter 2. A Relic of Betrayal. After that chilling report, Caleb left the operations center in a daze that only heightened his focus. He walked down the stronghold's long, echoing stone corridors, past murals depicting the Pack's ancient history, triumphs and losses, the cycles of the moons. The stone walls, usually a comfort, felt like the inside of a tomb. He didn't return to his private office. Instead, he descended into the stronghold archives, a place few were permitted to enter, because it held the dark truths of the Pack's existence. The air here was dry, smelling of mineral dust and deep magic, heavier than the burden he carried. His immediate goal was to look at the prophecy of destruction one last time. He needed to find a strategic advantage, a missing line, a hidden loophole in the ancient text that dictated his life's course. He pulled the scroll, brittle and yellowish, from its lead-lined case. Its edges crumbled slightly under his fingertips. He smoothed the scroll out on a rough-hewn table. The script, written in a language older than their Pack, spoke of the Trinity born, 3 children with the power to heal or destroy, and the Umber Covens need to harvest that power during the lunar eclipse. He traced the passage that had changed his life. To protect the Trinity, the Alpha must isolate the source of strength, lest the enemy finds the heart. The elders, mistaking the source of strength for the bond itself, interpreted this as a mandatory severance, a total, cruel rejection of the mate. In fact, the rejection was the single hardest thing he'd ever done. He closed his eyes, and the archive's silence dissolved into the sharp memory of that day. Anya's beautiful face twisted in pain, her tear-filled eyes reflecting the monster he had become, the way her beta mark went dark, like a dying star. He remembered the guttural, internal howl of his wolf as he crushed his mate's spirit. It was the moment he traded his happiness for his children's lives. It was an act of profound, desperate love, Caleb whispered to the empty room. Not only that, but the guilt was a knife he turned in his gut every single day. What if I misread it? He asked himself, his fingers trembling over the parchment. What if the source of strength was unity, not isolation? This was the second open loop, the terrifying possibility that his selfless act was actually a strategic blunder. With every heartbeat, he felt the pressure of the impending 16th birthday. It was the window of activation for the hidden gift. He had planned for a slow, controlled awakening, but the energy spike suggested that quiet control was now impossible. Suddenly, a low, dull thrumming sensation vibrated up his feet from the stone floor. It wasn't the stronghold's routine seismic hum. This was rhythmic, chaotic, and internal, a deep, raw psychic dissonance. It felt like a string in his own soul being plucked, hard and out of tune, yet familiar. He dropped the scroll. He didn't need the prophecy to tell him what it was. It was a chaotic surge of energy, a shared distress signal, and just like that, everything changed. The sound was unique. It belonged to 3 souls, inextricably linked, the Trinity. Chapter 3. The Premonition. As the silence stretched in the archive, the psychic dissonance grew, a low-frequency hum that settled behind Caleb's eyes. It was raw, chaotic, and terrifyingly close to the pure power the prophecy spoke of. He bolted from the archive, racing to the observation deck. This room was higher up, with windows overlooking the dense, old-growth forest that separated the stronghold from Shadow Creek. Meanwhile, he pulled his specialized pack instruments from his utility belt, a small, silver scanner tuned specifically to the unique resonant frequency of perfect pack mind-link energy. He held it up, his breath catching in his throat. The scanner, usually dormant, screamed with a sharp, intermittent red light. The energy source was undeniable, a brief jolt of raw psychic power that caused immediate, blinding pain and a rush of intense, shared emotions, confusion, panic, a sharp sting of physical pain, and overwhelming fear. The moment their eyes locked, not literally but psychically, Caleb's world tilted. He tasted the fear of his children. He felt their nascent power, uncontrolled and dangerous, reaching out like a flare. "It's begun," he ground out, the words tasting like ash. The hidden gift has begun. His perfectly controlled timeline, 16 years of isolation, the cold calculation of his alpha mind, all destroyed by a single, involuntary flicker. Because of that, the Umber Coven, who hunts such power, would know exactly where to look. He didn't know what scared him more, the terror in his children's nascent minds, or the horrifying realization that he had failed them by keeping them so far away. He slammed the scanner onto a nearby table, his hands shaking slightly, a rare display of loss of control. He looked through the reinforced glass, staring into the dark heart of the forest. The wind shifted, and with his scent in the air, he felt the faint, distant, protective pulse of Anya's wolf, responding to the children's distress, but she didn't know how to fight this kind of enemy. Caleb turned, his eyes blazing, the cold mask finally shattering to reveal the desperate alpha beneath. His voice, now laced with alpha command, cut through the deck's quiet hum. "Get me alpha transport. Beta Marcus, mobilize the retrieval team. Maximum speed, silent approach."
No uniforms. No lights.
Just black steel and teeth. Marcus, who had followed him, looked pale. Alpha, what happened? The children, Caleb hissed, already moving toward the exit. The twins' power, Marcus. It wasn't a spark. It was a beacon. And just like that, everything changed. He didn't wait for Marcus's reply. He was already running, his body moving on instinct, prepared to abandon all subtlety, because the time for quiet control was over. The game had changed, and he was racing toward the woman who hated him, toward the disaster he had sacrificed everything to prevent. Chapter 4. The Violent Summons. The Alpha transport was a blur of steel and shadow, tearing through the forest like a predator hunting its prey. The scent of pine and damp earth rushed in, mingling with the metallic tang of fear that clung to Caleb's tongue. He drove with reckless, instinctual speed, ignoring the winding trail, relying on his wolf's superior senses to navigate the crushing darkness. His mind was a battlefield. I have to get there.
Now.
Meanwhile, Beta Marcus gripped the dash, his knuckles white. Alpha, slow down. You'll tear the undercarriage. Caleb ignored him. Quiet. His voice was a low growl, already shifting closer to the wolf. He didn't know what scared him more, the thought of Anya facing the threat alone, or the agonizing certainty that he was about to shatter the fragile peace he'd imposed. In the span of a breath, it hit. Not a hum, not a flicker, but a physical, catastrophic perfect pack mind-link explosion. It was a shared psychic blast, raw, pure, and excruciatingly loud in Caleb's mind. The air inside the cabin felt like it had been superheated, and just like that, everything changed. The force of the mind link was like a dozen fists slamming into his temples, paralyzing him. He felt the pure, innocent terror of his children mixed with the overwhelming power they couldn't control. Not only that, but the long-suppressed, denied mate bond surged. It wasn't gentle. It was a white-hot river of primal connection that ripped through his carefully constructed wall, screaming, "Mate! Family!"
Danger.
Caleb slammed the brakes, the vehicle fishtailing violently into the thick underbrush. He slumped forward, fighting the psychic overload, sweat instantly beading on his forehead. "Alpha, what was that?" Marcus gasped, clutching his head. "The beacon," Caleb choked out, his voice rough. "It's lit. The Coven knows." Without thinking, he ripped the door open and scrambled out. He needed speed, not armor. He dropped to his hands and knees. The transition was agonizing, a familiar, intense process. Bones shifted, lengthening and cracking, skin stretched into thick, midnight black fur. The world narrowed to pure scent and sound. He was a massive black wolf, a creature of unparalleled speed and lethal grace. His immediate goal was primal. Run, protect, claim. He had to push down the mate bond surge, forcing the raw connection back into the subconscious, because he needed a clear head for the fight. But the love was a desperate claw, tearing at his control. As fire bloomed beneath her skin, no, his skin, he ran. The scent of pine turned to the faint, lingering, intoxicating scent of Anya, a mix of rain, cedar, and something uniquely her own, a scent he hadn't allowed himself to breathe in 16 years. With every step he took, he closed the distance, the black wolf flying through the night, a silent force of nature. He burst out of the woods, shifting back to human form mere yards from the small, defenseless wooden homestead. He kicked the door inward. It crashed against the wall, with splintering. He found them inside, not in their beds, but huddled in the living room, faces pale, eyes wide with residual shock. And standing over them, radiating a fury colder than the grave, was Anya Vance. Chapter 5. The Unforgiven Face. Anya was more beautiful than his memories, and far more dangerous. Her dark hair was loose, her strong stance defensive. She wore a simple charcoal shirt and jeans, but she might as well have been wearing a suit of armor forged from pure, unforgiving hatred. Her eyes, the same emerald green he still saw in his dreams, were fixed on him with a chilling intensity that was worse than any physical blow.
"You," she spat.
Her voice was low, trembling with a controlled rage that suggested she was moments from violence. "You have no right." The triplets, a trio of nervous energy, 2 boys and a girl, looked from their mother to the giant, scarred man who had just kicked down their door. Caleb's goal was simple: bypass the confrontation, enforce the evacuation.
Anya.
"There's no time. You need to gather them. We're going to the stronghold." "The stronghold?" She laughed, a short, sharp, terrifying sound. "After 16 years of deliberate, calculated silence? After you rejected us? You walk in here and issue a command." Deep down, she knew the truth, that he hadn't betrayed her, but she couldn't accept it. Caleb saw his true failure reflected in her unrelenting eyes. He had made himself the villain, which meant he couldn't now beg for forgiveness. He had to command. This is not a discussion. The triplets triggered the mind link. It was a beacon that just screamed across 3 territories. The Umber Coven is already on the move. Anya took a deliberate step toward him, placing her body between him and their children. Her voice dropped to a whisper, but it held the strength of tempered steel. "My children are safe. I protected them. You broke the promise. You abandoned them. You will leave now." As the silence roared between them, Caleb felt the crushing guilt. She was right to hate him, but her defiance, born of that misunderstanding, threatened to kill them all. He realized she saw his reappearance as just another act of control and rejection, not salvation. "Anya, please. I didn't reject you because I wanted to. I rejected you because of the—" Before he could speak, the windows of the small cabin shattered. It wasn't the sound of breaking glass. It was the sharp, swooshing sound of something fast, something unnatural, cutting through the silence. 2 dark, lethal figures, the Coven scouts, landed silently on the broken floor. The air instantly grew cold, heavy with the metallic, dead smell of shadow magic and ancient blood. The confrontation was cut short. Chapter 6: The Necessary Wound. The 2 figures were inhumanly fast. They moved like flickers of smoke, their eyes glowing with a malevolent, faint violet light. They were vampires, but not the weak, petty kind. These were Umber Coven scouts, infused with low-level shadow magic, and they were here for the Trinity. Instead of negotiating with Anya, Caleb reacted. He didn't bother shifting. His strength was needed now, immediately. He lunged toward the closest scout, a male with razor-sharp fingernails extending into dark claws. "Get behind me, Anya," Caleb roared, his voice pure alpha command, instinctively protecting the weakest link. He tackled the first vampire, driving them both through the remaining window frame. They landed hard on the wet earth. The space between them burned with the tension of the fight. The air, now filled with the rank smell of the vampiric energy, felt suffocating. Meanwhile, the second scout ignored Anya and focused immediately on the source of power, one of the triplets, the girl, who whimpered and instinctively covered her head. Anya didn't hesitate. Her body moved on instinct. She was a trained beta, a natural fighter. She grabbed a cast-iron skillet from the kitchen counter and swung it with ferocious accuracy, cracking the scout across the temple. It staggered, surprised by the sudden, mundane attack. Caleb knew he couldn't win this cleanly. They had to flee. He drove his fist into the first scout's sternum. The vampire hissed, recovering too fast. It raked its shadow-infused claws across Caleb's exposed left forearm. The pain was immediate and searing, not just a physical cut, but a deep, magical corrosive burn that felt like icy fire. He took the calculated blow. He needed Anya to see this. The blood, the dark magic, the sheer impossibility of her protecting their children alone. "Look," Caleb shouted, pointing with his good hand at the spreading blackness around the wound. "That is not a normal enemy. You cannot fight this alone." The sheer lethality of the threat registered in Anya's eyes, finally eclipsing her hate. Her breath caught. She saw her mate fall, not fully but falter, and reality sink in. Her true goal shifted from hating Caleb to protecting her children. With a single glance filled with agonizing resignation, she nodded.
"Fine."
"Stronghold." She scooped up the children, her voice shaking but firm. "But you die if you touch them." Caleb nodded, forcing the pain down. "Deal." He drove the first scout back with a furious snarl, giving Anya the precious few seconds she needed. He raced toward her, reaching out, not to command, but to lead. Their hands brushed, a brief, agonizing contact. It was the first physical touch in 16 years, and it was electric, painful, and overwhelmingly real. As if pulled by a string, Caleb felt the primal, protective surge of their connection as he led his family across the threshold of the homestead, locking himself and Anya into the central conflict. Chapter 7. The Stronghold's Weight. The transition from the wild, panicked forest to the stone heart of the stronghold was jarring. Caleb pushed the small, terrified group, Anya and the 3 bewildered children, into the subterranean Alpha Denver. The air here was heavy with the sense of wolf and steel, a constant reminder of war. After that terrifying confrontation with the Coven scouts, Caleb was bleeding, but he didn't falter.
He couldn't afford to.
His goal was to establish immediate, unquestionable control, because the smallest slip in discipline could invite disaster. The pack assembled quickly, eyes wide with suspicion and confusion as they watched the disgraced mate of their alpha, Anya Vance, walk into their sanctum, dragging the 3 children Caleb had sworn didn't exist. "Alpha," Marcus greeted him, his eyes flicking to the dark wound on Caleb's forearm. "Healer is ready." "Later," Caleb snapped, his voice sharp with authority. He stepped forward, his massive frame dominating the room. "These are the Trinity. They are under absolute alpha protection. They are not to be approached without my express command, nor are they to be questioned." He issued a torrent of rigid, specific orders, security protocols doubled, training schedules finalized, and the triplets' living quarters assigned to the deep, fortified level, a safe, luxurious, but undeniably isolated prison. Meanwhile, Caleb saw Anya's reaction. She scanned the cavernous den, the high, vaulted ceilings, the rough-hewn stone benches, the symbols of pack hierarchy, with a cold, proud defiance. This wasn't protection to her, it was a cage. He watched her pull the triplets close, her touch fierce, her face etched with the silent promise that she would fight this environment as fiercely as she had fought the vampires. What followed was the unavoidable clash. Anya crossed the floor, ignoring the pack members who nervously averted their gazes. She stopped directly in front of Caleb, her chin lifted. The scent of ozone from the residual shadow magic on his clothes was nothing compared to the fiery determination radiating off her. 3 hours of sleep, Alpha? Her voice was a low challenge, deliberately using his title like a weapon. 6 hours of immediate psychic control drills? They're exhausted. They're 16. They're children. Caleb met her gaze, his internal state a knot of conflicting needs. The need to crush her resistance for safety, and the primal need to pull her close and reassure her. At that moment, he chose the shield of ice. "They are the Trinity," he stated flatly. "They are a beacon for ancient vampires. They do not have the luxury of normal childhood exhaustion. We have days, maybe hours, before the full Coven arrives. If they cannot control the link, they will invite the end of our world. Is that clear?" Despite that chilling reality, Anya didn't back down. "It's clear that your methodology relies on crushing spirit rather than nurturing power. My children are not soldiers, Alpha. They are people, and they are not the enemy." The challenge hung heavy in the room. Caleb could have used his Alpha command to force her silence, but then he saw the flicker of respect in Marcus's eyes, and he knew he had to let Anya speak. He needed her to believe he was still a functional Alpha, even if he was a terrible mate. He simply nodded, acknowledging her defiance. "Their empathy is your responsibility, Anya. Their discipline is mine. You will train them."
Now.
Chapter 8. The Alpha's Failure. The first training session was held in the Stronghold's inner sanctuary, a circular, magically shielded room designed to absorb psychic overloads. The lighting was soft, but the atmosphere was thick with tension. As a result of Caleb's rigid schedule, the triplets were tired, scared, and resentful. Caleb tried to enforce the link using sheer alpha command. He stood in the center, projecting his will, trying to force their chaotic energy into a single, cohesive bond. Focus. Feel the bond, but contain it, he ordered. He projected strength, discipline, and an iron will. But then, the pressure was too much. The triplets cried out simultaneously, clutching their heads as a sharp, psychic feedback loop slammed into them. It wasn't just pain, it was the backlash of rejected energy. What's worse, the feedback bounced off them and slammed into Caleb. He staggered backward, his vision momentarily blurring, a high-pitched ringing in his ears. The psychic force was volatile, overwhelming. It was unlike anything his alpha training had prepared him for. He was stronger than any single shifter, but then this was 3, and they were failing. He gripped the stone wall for support, humiliated and frustrated. He realized his old methods are useless and dangerous against this new power. He had tried to brute force a delicate magical connection, because brute force was the only tool he'd allowed himself to use for 16 years. Instead of moving away, Anya stepped smoothly past his reeling body. Her scent, that familiar, grounding mix of cedar and rain, cut through the metallic ozone of the backlash. She knelt immediately, ignoring Caleb completely. "Breathe, my love." "It's okay," she murmured, her voice soft, empathetic, and full of raw, maternal instinct. She didn't command. She connected. She reached out, placing a hand gently on each triplet, and then she looked at the third, across the room. She was using her old beta empathy, a trait Caleb had forgotten she even possessed, to stabilize the psychic field. She felt it, clear as day, the chaotic rhythm of their hearts. She began to hum a low, ancient lullaby that had been the secret song of their mate bond. As her wolf stirred, she eased the trauma, knitting the edges of the psychic field. The room's energy softened. The triplets sighed, relaxing into the calm Anya was projecting. They didn't achieve the link, but they achieved peace. Caleb watched from the shadows, humbled and defeated. His raw strength had failed. Anya's quiet empathy had succeeded. In the quiet that followed, Caleb felt a strange sense of awe mixed with professional jealousy. She was teaching him that the power of the Trinity could only be governed by love, not by fear. He had to find a way to reconcile his alpha authority with her gentle, essential command, or they would all fail. Chapter 9. Tactical Espionage. The humbling failure of the training drill drove Caleb back into his element. Strategic isolation. He dismissed the pack and returned to the operations center alone. Not only that, but he was determined to prove his tactical value still outweighed his emotional failures. His goal was to define the enemy's full resources. He spread out the gear retrieved from the 2 Umber Coven scouts they had fought, fragments of obsidian magic, a few enchanted bone shards, and a complex, sigil-marked piece of jewelry. He focused on the jewelry. It radiated a cold, ancient power, unlike the younger, feral vampires the pack usually encountered. He used specialized anti-magic dust and UV light to reveal the true symbols etched into the silver. As the truth unraveled, Caleb realized the magnitude of the problem was exponentially larger than he'd prepared for. The sigils were not Coven markings. They were ancient Royal Umbra House seals, indicating a direct line to the original bloodlines of the vampire aristocracy. "It's not a fringe group," Caleb muttered, rubbing the growing blackness around the wound on his forearm. "It's the core." What followed was the chilling confirmation of his deepest fear. He ran the seal against a hidden database of supernatural intelligence and found the legend of the Weaver, the Coven leader who had existed for millennia, seeking the power of the Trinity to achieve true immortality, to literally rewrite the rules of life and death. Because of that new knowledge, Caleb realized the lunar eclipse was not just a powerful night. It was the final, required catalyst for a ritual of global scale. This is bigger than the pack. This is bigger than the prophecy. Even so, he managed to pinpoint a recurring magical signature on the scout's gear, a low-level homing beacon that led to a secondary Coven base hidden near the edge of the human city. But then, the communications system flared red again, not with a psychic surge, but with a highly specific, chilling report from a distant outpost. A key pack elder, a retired beta named Elias who managed the pack's city assets, had vanished. The report, terse and cold, read, Elder Elias Thorne, status MIA. Evidence suggests non-lethal extraction via shadow magic. Caleb stared at the screen, the image of Elias, a kind, older wolf who had always treated him with quiet respect, burned into his mind. This was a plot twist. The Coven hadn't just attacked his family, they had struck at his community, deliberately taking a peripheral, yet vital, pack member. They weren't just hunters, they were strategists. To make things worse, the message was clear. They had leverage. The stakes were no longer just the lives of the Trinity, but the loyalty and morale of the entire Obsidian Pack. Caleb slammed his fist onto the console, the granite protesting under his strength. He had been planning for a defensive siege, which meant he had fatally underestimated his ancient enemy. He needed a partner, not a subordinate. He needed the one person whose focus was as primal as his own. He stood, the scent of antiseptic and old paper suddenly replaced by the fresh, powerful scent of the inevitable fight. He knew where he had to go next. Chapter 10 Shared Observation. The news of Elder Elias Thorne's capture felt like a physical weight, pressing Caleb's shoulders down. As a result, his strategies had to shift instantly from pure defense to aggressive recovery. He needed Anya's intuitive understanding of the Triplet's power. He found her in the secluded observation lounge, watching the three teenagers attempt a focused meditation drill. She wasn't standing over them. She was sitting quietly, her posture radiating an empathetic calm that seemed to soak up their anxiety. His goal was to establish a purely professional partnership. The Coven has taken Elder Thorne, Caleb stated, bypassing any conversation about their failed training session. His voice was clipped, efficient. They are using him for leverage. They are highly organized, which means the threat is exponentially worse than we anticipated. Anya turned, her eyes now serious, the rage replaced by grim determination. Leverage. They want the Trinity's power, but they want to control when they get it. This is a game of patience, Alpha. We don't have time for patience. Instead of arguing, Caleb found himself nodding. Her strategic assessment was accurate, swift, and brutal. He stepped closer to the observation window, and for the next hour, they fell into a tense, natural co-parenting dynamic, a painful echo of the life they should have had. Meanwhile, they discussed the children, not the enemy. Leo's link always breaks first, Anya murmured, pointing to one of the boys. He carries the most anxiety. He senses the stakes too clearly. The girl, Alara, Caleb countered, his gaze fixed on their daughter. She holds the bond, but she channels too much energy, too fast. She's a wildfire. Between one breath and the next, they were simply two parents, discussing their children's needs, not their powers, but their selves. Caleb felt a dangerous longing, a fleeting moment of domestic normalcy that threatened to melt the ice around his heart. Her scent, so close now, was a siren song to his wolf. But then, the conversation stalled. Anya looked away from the window, her gaze landing heavily on Caleb's face. Caleb. She used his name, shedding the cold title. Her voice was soft, devastatingly personal. You came back. You fought for them. You were willing to bleed for me again. She gestured to the healing wound on his forearm. Why the cruelty then? If you cared enough to protect them now, why did you reject us so cruelly 16 years ago? What made the betrayal necessary? As the silence stretched, the question hung like a sword above their heads. Her empathy was piercing his control. He felt the cold weight of his original justification, the prophecy, but the words caught in his throat. He couldn't lie, which meant he couldn't speak the truth either. He turned abruptly, his jaw rigid. It was the only way to keep you alive. It was half-truth, but the emotional cost was high. He had to leave before she saw the guilt that burned like acid beneath his skin. Chapter 11. The Crushing Flash. Caleb retreated to the training floor, needing the concrete, physical distraction of a solitary drill. He tried to focus on his form, but Anya's question hammered in his mind. Why the cruelty? That's why he didn't realize she had followed him. She needed to know the answer as desperately as he needed to keep it hidden. In the center of the training room, the two remaining triplets, Leo and Cassian, were struggling with their mind link. Alara's captured energy was missing, making the connection jagged and unstable. Anya rushed to help. Focus on the anchor, Leo. Feel your brother's fear, but channel your own determination. As Anya helped Leo bridge the gap with Cassian, the emotional energy flared. Anya's beta empathy was like a magnet, and Caleb, standing too close, felt the residual, desperate pull. Without warning, his alpha guard, the psychic wall he'd built around his most painful memories, momentarily faltered. She felt it, clear as day. Through Leo's fear and the chaotic link, Anya's consciousness brushed against Caleb's deepest, most protected corner. It wasn't a memory, it was a crushing flash. Caleb saw the past through her eyes. The moment he stood before the pack elders, his heart physically tearing itself in two, the agonizing, desperate internal monologue telling himself reject her, or they all die, including the children. He heard the chilling, ancient voice of the prophecy echoing in his mind. The mate bond must break. Alpha. It is the key they seek. The moment their eyes locked, Anya gasped, pulling back as if burned. Her face went slack, then twisted not with hatred, but with a horrifying, quiet understanding. Midpoint shift. The truth was out. Caleb's betrayal was revealed as self-sacrifice. His solitude was not arrogance, it was a defense mechanism. As a result, the core misbelief of the story, Anya's conviction that love always leads to betrayal, was instantly shattered, forcing her into an internal crisis. Caleb staggered back, his breath ragged, his hands flying up defensively. He was exposed, vulnerable, terrifyingly naked before her. Before either could speak, the intercom crackled to life, static giving way to a resonant, magically amplified voice that echoed throughout the stronghold. It was the Coven leader's direct threat. Alpha Thorne. We hold the old man. The price for Elder Elias is simple. Deliver the 3 gifts to the quarry on the night of the eclipse. Refuse, and the pack bleeds for your children's power. To make things worse, the leader's voice held a chilling, subtle note of shadow magic, causing the remaining 2 triplets to scream in distress as the broadcast cut out. The Coven had countered their biggest success, achieving the link, by taking their most valuable resource, the Elder, and using it to leverage the ultimate sacrifice. Chapter 12: The Cold Decision's Aftermath. In the quiet that followed the broadcast, the tension was unbearable. Caleb sank onto the nearest bench, the shame of his revealed past warring with the cold terror of the Coven's threat. The Elder for the Trinity. An impossible choice. His goal was to reassert control and make the cold, necessary decision alone. He started running evacuation logistics in his head, already preparing to sacrifice the stronghold to save the children. But then, Anya approached him. She didn't rage.
She didn't accuse me.
She stood over him, her face devastated by the memory flash she had seen, her eyes holding a deep, agonizing pity he couldn't bear. You idiot, she whispered, her voice thick with pain. She didn't know what scared her more, the Coven's threat, or the depth of the burden Caleb had carried alone for so long. You thought you had to shatter my heart to keep it safe. She knelt before him. With a single glance, she conveyed everything, the end of her bitterness, the full, devastating understanding of his sacrifice. She reached out, placing her hand gently over his scarred forearm, a gesture of shared pain, not condemnation. You chose my hatred because you thought it was a better defense than my love, she stated. You were wrong. Caleb could only look at her, the dam of his emotional state breaking slightly. He realized the depth of his miscalculation. His sacrifice was seen as betrayal, not protection, meaning he had failed in his ultimate goal of ensuring her emotional well-being. I had to, he rasped, his voice raw. The prophecy. Instead of letting him continue the justification, Anya interrupted, her voice gaining a steely edge. We save the Elder, Caleb. We protect the children. We fight them together. Her resolve was absolute. She was no longer the isolated victim. She was the strategic partner. As if fate demanded it, she took the burden of the decision from him, making it their shared responsibility. "We have to finish the training," she declared, rising to her feet, her beta empathy connecting with the pain of the remaining triplets. "We make the link so powerful that the Coven can't control it. We use the eclipse as our weapon, not theirs." Caleb looked at her, seeing his true mate for the first time in 16 years. Not the broken beta he had rejected, but the powerful, resilient Luna he needed. This was the new direction. He was forced to trust her completely. Without another word, he stood up. "Tell me your plan, Anya." Chapter 13. The Vault of Truth. The air in the operations center was still heavy with the scent of fear and the lingering electronic echo of the Coven leader's threat. After that shattering confrontation, the Alpha Den felt less like a stronghold and more like a ticking clock counting down to the eclipse. Caleb knew he couldn't hold anything back now. Anya had seen the truth of his sacrifice, which meant she deserved the full truth of the danger. He had given her his pain. Now he would give her his war. "Follow me," Caleb instructed, his voice low and serious. He led Anya away from the occupied den and into the stronghold's deepest vault, a cold, circular chamber shielded by layers of ancient warding magic. This was the true heart of the Pack's secrets. His immediate goal was to earn her total trust, because their survival depended on their unity. He needed her to understand the final piece of the enemy's plan. Inside, he activated a crystal display, projecting a shimmering, three-dimensional image of the celestial bodies, the moon, the earth, and the sun, aligning perfectly. The focus narrowed to a dense, black field of magical energy surrounding the moon. The prophecy wasn't just about the mind link, Caleb explained, gesturing to the image. It was about the lunar eclipse ritual. The Coven leader, the Weaver, doesn't just want power, they want true immortality, the ability to unravel and reweave the fabric of reality itself. They need the raw energy of the TRINITY'S link at the absolute zenith of the eclipse. Not only that, but he revealed the Coven's plan was built on a lie. The link isn't the power source, it's the conduit. They need the triplets' unity to draw down the eclipse's raw, uncontrollable shadow magic and bind it to the Weaver's soul. If they succeed, they become a god. If they fail, the uncontrolled energy tears the world apart. Anya watched the display, her eyes reflecting the cold light. She didn't flinch at the magnitude of the revelation. Her face was grim, resolute. Deep down, she knew the truth, that she had wasted 16 years fighting the wrong enemy. As the truth unraveled, Caleb reached into a lead-line niche and retrieved a weapon. It wasn't a standard pack issue. It was a dagger forged from consecrated silver and blessed by generations of pack mystics. It was his last resort, meant for the final confrontation. He presented it to her, hilt first. "This is the only known defense against the Weaver's magic. It has to pierce the heart. You take the primary role. I'll take the distraction." Anya didn't hesitate. She didn't ask why he had kept this ultimate secret. She accepted the dagger, her fingers closing around the cold metal. In that moment, Caleb felt the full, beautiful surge of her trust, a profound connection that solidified their bond more powerfully than any shared kiss ever could. And just like that, everything changed. Caleb had fully surrendered his isolation. Chapter 14. Triumph and Consequence. Their shared goal was now clear. Find the Elder and use the remaining time to perfect the TRINITY'S link. Anya devised a daring plan. They would use a limited, temporary, empathetic link with one of the remaining triplets to pinpoint the Elder's general distress signal, which would lead them to the Coven's staging ground. After that briefing, they moved like two halves of a whole, their combat synergy instantly returning, stronger than before. Caleb's alpha strength protected her, and Anya's intuition guided his brute force. His goal was simple: prove their combat synchronization was viable. They executed a lightning-fast infiltration of a known Coven meeting point near the city's docks, the secondary base Caleb had detected. They moved through the shadows, a fluid dance of dark fur and shifting muscle. Caleb was a powerful force, but Anya was the sharper edge. She sensed the booby traps. She knew where the enemy would hesitate. They achieved major success. Using a suppressed gas, they took down 2 peripheral Coven members, securing a vital datapad that detailed the locations of several smaller magical outposts and, more critically, the exact time of the ritual start. But then, their success came with a severe cost. The moment the datapad was secured, a massive, retaliatory counterattack erupted. Coven members poured out of the shadows, more than they'd encountered before, a swirling force of shadow magic and teeth. Retreat.
Now.
Caleb roared, throwing a flash grenade to buy precious seconds. Meanwhile, he fought with fierce aggression, the exhilaration of fighting beside her again making him feel invincible. He felt the wild, desperate energy of his wolf surging, but the odds were overwhelming. As a result, they barely escaped back to the stronghold, their clothes torn, their bodies bruised, and the scent of vampire blood thick in the air. The Coven had been alerted to their intent to fight, escalating the conflict from hunting to open warfare. To make things worse, as they stumbled back into the stronghold, panting and bleeding, they heard the triumphant, clear sound from the training sanctuary. The remaining triplets, watching the danger their parents faced, pushed past the pain and the absence of their captured sibling. The 2 remaining triplets successfully execute the final, flawless connection of the perfect pack mind link. It was a pure, stable sonic wave of power, their strength and Anya's guidance finally merging into a perfect whole. Caleb grabbed Anya's arm, his eyes wide. They did it. It's stable. A beat later, the wave of energy was overshadowed by the horrifying realization. The Coven knows this, too. Chapter 15. The Final Night. The moon was nearly full, casting long, stark shadows across the stronghold battlements. Hours before the eclipse, the air was unnaturally still, thick with dread and the cold, anticipatory silence of impending war. Caleb and Anya stood together on the ramparts, not as Alpha and Beta, but as co-leaders and mates. His goal was to give Anya a final moment of peace and certainty, acknowledging his love before the world burned. "We have the time and the place," Anya said, her voice steady as she looked out at the darkening horizon. "We hit them during the convergence. We used the children's link to flood the ritual site with raw energy, disrupting the Weaver's concentration." "It's the only plan," Caleb agreed, looking not at the horizon, but at her profile. He reached out and gently brushed a stray strand of hair from her cheek. With every heartbeat, he felt the raw, final act love he had suppressed for so long. "We lost 16 years, Anya murmured, her eyes distant. "I didn't know what scared her more, losing them, or realizing I could finally forgive you, only to lose you again." Caleb pulled her closer, his arms wrapping around her. This time, there was no shame, no guilt, only fierce, desperate love and firm resolve. "I won't let you," he vowed, his breath warm against her temple. "I chose to die alone once. I won't do it again. My life, my purpose, is only useful now if I fight beside you." As fire bloomed beneath her skin, Anya looked up, and Caleb saw the promise of their reunion, not just lovers, but warriors who understood the true meaning of sacrifice. He leaned down, and their lips met. It wasn't a tentative kiss. It was a desperate, consuming final act reunion, a kiss that tasted of regret, steel, and a future they might never see. Their mate bond, suppressed for so long, pulsed to life, demanding to be recognized. In that moment, they reclaimed their bond. That's why Caleb felt an absolute, profound peace. He was ready to die, but not alone. But then, the tranquility was shattered. A low, persistent vibration began to shake the ground beneath their feet. The forest, once still, began to whisper with unnatural sounds. Shadows danced between them. The Coven's forward units had arrived, not in a stealthy infiltration, but in a vast, overwhelming wave. "They're early," Caleb said, his voice dropping to an alpha command laced with lethal intensity. He looked at Anya, then at the ominous, darkening sky. Get the triplet secured. It begins now. Chapter 16. Alpha command fails. The ground trembled. The siege didn't begin with a warning, but with a horrifying wave of magical energy that slammed into the stronghold perimeter. As the sky darkened, the entire forest outside the stronghold seemed to bend and writhe, as if the shadows themselves were tearing loose from the earth. Caleb was instantly in alpha mode, his resolve hard as the granite walls around him. His immediate goal was to rally the pack and repel the magical defenses, because the initial breach was always the most dangerous. Hold the line, Caleb roared, projecting his alpha command, pure, raw dominance, outward, trying to flood the pack's minds with certainty and courage. But then, a wave of cold, viscous countermagic surged from the invading forces, hitting the perimeter's shields. It was the Weaver's power, ancient and focused. In the span of a breath, the magic twisted Caleb's alpha projection, turning his strength into a painful, psychic static. Caleb felt it, clear as day. His authority was not just resisted, it was neutralized. His own power, his core identity, was momentarily isolated and silenced. The pack felt the confusion, and the line faltered. Disbelief turned instantly to agonizing dread. He had spent his life preparing for a physical war, which meant he was terrifyingly unprepared for a purely magical one. His traditional source of strength was useless against the shadow magic. What followed was the Coven leader's entrance. A figure of chilling grace, the Weaver was not the snarling brute Caleb had expected, but a pale, impossibly old entity draped in shadows that seemed to absorb the torchlight. They moved with predatory certainty, bypassing the chaotic outer lines. Before she could move, the Weaver broke through the inner defenses, their eyes, two chips of obsidian malice, fixed on the sanctuary deep inside. They didn't pause for the pack. They were heading straight for the remaining two children. Caleb's heart skipped a beat. His goal was no longer to win the siege, but to buy seconds for Anya to secure the triplets. He had to draw Weaver's attention. He had to become the target. Chapter 17. The Alpha's Fall. Caleb intercepted the Weaver in the main courtyard, a desperate, reckless move. He shifted instantly, transforming into his towering, midnight black wolf form. A growl rose in his throat, pure, desperate fury. The Weaver stopped, turning their attention to the Alpha. The air shimmered, thick with dark magic. The lonely Alpha, the Weaver hissed, their voice a dry, echoing whisper. You have achieved nothing, Thorne. 16 years of sacrifice, and you deliver the children to my doorstep. You delayed, which meant you gave them time to ripen. The taunt hit harder than any blow. The Weaver mocked his delay, mocking his delayed action, and the cost of his self-imposed isolation. His emotional state became a simple, overriding purpose. By time. They will not take them. See, Caleb launched himself forward, fighting with everything he had, teeth, claws, and sheer, primal alpha strength. He felt invincible with her near, a ghost of the power he had felt with Anya, but she wasn't here. He was alone against an ancient, magical power. The Weaver simply raised a hand. The shadow magic was not a spell, it was an extension of their being. It moved like a living entity, wrapping around Caleb's massive form. He felt a terrible pressure, like being crushed under the weight of a mountain. Your strength is meaningless, little Alpha, the Weaver whispered, and without thinking, a bolt of pure, icy shadow energy lanced out, bypassing his thick hide and penetrating his chest. The pain was beyond anything Caleb had ever known, not a physical wound, but a magical, near-fatal one that paralyzed his heart and lungs. He stumbled back, his transformation reversing partially, his human body staggering and collapsing to the cold, stone ground. His goal had been achieved. He bought time. His internal world collapsed. He was physically eliminated from the conflict, forced to accept the crushing truth. He had failed to protect his family on his own terms. He welcomed the physical agony, believing his death would finally fulfill his duty. From the ground, helpless, Caleb watched in agonizing slow motion as the Weaver effortlessly cast aside the pack members who tried to intervene. His eyes blazed. He saw Anya rush from the sanctuary door, the silver dagger clutched in her hand. She was too late. The Weaver, a blur of malice, disabled Anya's defense with a flick of their hand and effortlessly seized one of the remaining triplets. Chapter 18. All is lost. Anya's scream was ripped from her lungs, a sound of pure, desolate agony that Caleb would carry into oblivion. Bleeding heavily and drifting into unconsciousness, Caleb could only watch. He saw the Weaver hold the terrified child aloft. Moments later, he felt the agonizing, psychic snap of the mind link as their child was taken, a violent severing that felt like a piece of his own soul being ripped out. His internal world shattered. His goal was simply to stay conscious long enough to see Anya safe. But then, even that hope dissolved. The sight of the loss confirmed his deepest fear. Love leads to pain, and his sacrifice was for nothing. The Weaver, having secured their prize, cast a final, contemptuous look at the prone Alpha. We await you at the quarry, Thorne. Bring the last two, or the Elder dies first. And then, they vanished into the shadows, taking the child with them. Silence. The battle stopped. The remaining Coven scouts faded, their mission accomplished. The strong, rhythmic beat of Caleb's heart slowed, faltering under the weight of the shadow magic. He was powerless, defeated, and believed he had lost both his mate and his child. His chest ached with a physical and psychic emptiness. He looked at Anya, who was kneeling in the courtyard, her face buried in the remaining triplet's hair, her body racked by silent sobs. She was alive, but broken. He loses consciousness in the ruins, hearing only the bleak silence after the chaos. His last thought was a desperate, failed apology to the woman he had loved and broken twice over. Chapter 19. The Transfer of Command. Caleb awakened in the sterile silence of the medical bay, his body a map of throbbing pain. The void left by the two kidnapped children was a psychic wound that threatened to pull him under. After that devastating failure, he felt only a cold, focused resolve. Anya was there, not as a caregiver, but as a commander. She looked exhausted, but her emerald eyes were twin points of lethal focus. The silver dagger, still clutched in her hand, was no longer a trophy of war, but a tool of surgical precision. "You're alive," she stated, her tone professional, betraying no emotion. "But you're compromised. Your alpha energy is a poison to their shadow magic. Your strength is their target." She laid out her plan, a tactical feint, exploiting the Weaver's predictable arrogance. She realized her old methods are useless and dangerous against this new power. She would use the stable link of Alara and Cashin to draw the Weaver's attack, and then, using the last piece of intelligence Caleb had gathered, she would strike a specific point in the ritual circle. His goal was to survive and understand her strategy. In the span of a breath, Caleb saw the brilliance in her plan. It was fluid, empathetic, and accounted for magical vulnerabilities, everything his rigid defense had lacked. He nodded, not with arrogance, but with profound respect. "The pack follows you, Luna. I was blind to your full strength.
Now, use it."
He was relinquishing his alpha role completely, his internal transformation cemented by the necessity of trust. Anya walked to the table and retrieved the consecrated silver dagger. She didn't offer it as a gift. She placed it in his hand, cold and heavy. "This is the crucial distraction, Caleb. Your life force is the lore. You hit them when I say." Chapter 20. The Final Briefing. Caleb forced himself upright, the pain a constant, burning reminder of his failure. He stood before the remaining pack members, a handful of wounded warriors, their faces grim. He spoke, not with the booming alpha command, but with the quiet authority of a humbled father and a strategic partner. "The alpha of the Obsidian Pack failed you," Caleb stated, his voice raw. "My methods were old, my focus was narrow. The enemy is magic, not muscle. Our survival now rests on faith." What followed was the most difficult command he'd ever given. "Luna Anya Vance commands this assault. Her empathy is our guide. Her strategy is our shield. You follow her orders as if they were my own. She goes in with the Trinity. We will ensure her return. His goal was to unite the pack behind Anya and empower her command. The pack members, watching their broken alpha openly sacrifice his authority, felt a surge of loyalty, not to his title, but to his honest intent. They now understood the true meaning of the mate bond. Anya stepped forward, meeting the pack's eyes with unwavering confidence. She was the Luna Ascendant, and the pack's morale instantly stabilized. She turned to Caleb, sharing a knowing, resolute look. No words needed to confirm their unity, their love, or the deadly nature of the mission. As the link solidified, Caleb felt the calming certainty of her purpose wash over him. Chapter 21. The Race to the Quarry. As the eclipse began its deadly descent, casting a cold, metallic light over the stronghold, Caleb vanished into the hidden escape tunnel. He moved with the aid of Marcus, the trusted beta, pushing his injured body past its breaking point. His goal was simple: arrive in time to execute the final strategic distraction. Despite that debilitating magical wound, he focused entirely on the faint, electric hum of Anya's presence, leading him like a compass needle. With every step he took, the tunnel air grew colder, wetter, and heavier with a distant, pulsing scent of shadow magic. He was no longer thinking of himself as the Alpha. He was the King Sacrifice, the crucial supporting character, KSC, aiding the main protagonist, MP, in her final push. He burst from the tunnel's mouth, gasping, into the high, rocky outcrop overlooking the quarry. Below, the ritual fire burned with a terrible violet light. He saw it, clear as day, the stone altar, the restrained bodies of Elder Elias and his 3 children, and Anya's figure engaging the Weaver. The point of direct confrontation is imminent. The Weaver had the power, but Anya had the plan, and Caleb had the knife and the timing. Chapter 22. The Climax. Anya's move. Anya delivered the bait, releasing Alara and Cashin. Their link flared immediately, focused, furious, and controlled, but not yet complete. The Weaver lunged to seize them. Caleb's move. Caleb didn't hesitate. He forced himself upright, raising the silver dagger to the sky. He projected his compromised alpha energy in a burning, blinding flare, a sacrifice of his life force. The Weaver. You face the Alpha. The Weaver, focused on crushing the children's power, instinctively diverted the full, devastating force of the shadow magic away from the Trinity and directly at Caleb. He was instantly enveloped, the pain a paralyzing fire. Anya's triumph. The diversion was all Anya needed. She and the Elder, who freed himself as the shadow magic shifted, raced forward. Anya struck first, then Elder Elias provided a crucial opening. Caleb felt the raw, pure love of their mate bond flood him, a final, internal wave of power as she drove the silver dagger deep into the Weaver's heart. The resulting implosion was silent and devastating. The Weaver dissolved into a pillar of dark, vaporized magic. The pressure on the quarry vanished. The raw, chaotic eclipse energy, no longer bound by the Weaver, surged outward, threatening to incinerate everything. But then, the 5 children, feeling the desperate distress of their parents and Elder Elias, instantly unified their power. The perfect pack mind link, now complete with their rescued siblings, didn't absorb the power. It acted as a massive grounding rod, neutralizing the chaotic energy into a harmless, healing wave that washed over the entire quarry. Conflict resolved. Shared strength triumphs. Caleb's internal flaw is permanently overcome. The final, healing wave of psychic energy from the triplets washed over Caleb, relieving the magical corruption and reinforcing the power of their united family. Chapter 23. Falling Action. The pain was clean now. Exhaustion was overwhelming, but the dread was gone. Caleb staggered across the quarry floor, meeting Anya at the altar. They didn't speak. They simply embraced their 5 children, Leo, Cashin, Alara, and the 2 who had been captured, a moment of raw, relieved reunion that cemented the truth of their family. His goal was to acknowledge his family's survival and express his gratitude to Anya. He sees her now, clear as day, as the true power. He looked at Anya, his eyes burning with exhausted admiration. He didn't apologize for the sacrifice, he apologized for the timing. "I'm so sorry, Luna. I almost missed it all." She simply kissed him, a kiss of exhaustion, pride, and total acceptance. His silent communication with Anya confirms his acceptance of his vulnerability and his happiness. Caleb gathered the two most exhausted children into his arms, their scents mingling with the smoke. He allowed Anya to take the lead in escorting the entire pack back to the stronghold. She was the one who had won the war. She deserved the acclaim. Chapter 24. Resolution. Days later, the stronghold was quiet, the wounds healing, the grief subsiding into gratitude. Anya found Caleb in the reclaimed Luna's quarters, overseeing the construction of a new, massive training room, a shared space. Her goal was to reaffirm their mate bond and partnership for the future. Caleb turned, healthy now, his alpha scent rich and strong, but without the desperate, guarded edge it once held. He took her hands. "I need to speak the words I suppressed for 16 years, he began, his voice thick. "I apologize, Anya. Not for the sacrifice. That saved us. I apologize for the pain, for the hatred, for making you carry that burden of separation alone. I failed you, and I failed the bond." Anya squeezed his hand, her emerald eyes soft. "I saw your heart, Caleb. The pain was worse than the hatred. Now we are whole." New equilibrium established. Caleb is no longer the solitary alpha burdened by a secret. He is the partner, father, and mate who finally knows the meaning of true strength. Later that evening, before the entire pack, Caleb publicly addressed the pack, affirming Luna Anya's co-leadership and his complete trust in her. His transformation from isolation to connection was complete. Epilogue scene. 6 months later. The sun was warm on the open meadow near the rebuilt stronghold. The sounds of laughter and the light thud of shifting fur filled the air. Caleb watched Anya training the 5 triplets. They weren't using rigid military drills, but fluid, empathetic exercises, a dance of shared power. They moved as one unit, 2 parents and 5 children, their spirits and their powers effortlessly connected. Caleb leaned against a massive oak tree, a sense of profound, quiet contentment settling over him. He felt the low, constant, comforting hum of their perfect pack mind link, now permanently integrated into his life, a psychic warmth that never wavered. He realized the terror of the prophecy had faded, replaced by the profound, grounding truth of his family. He smiled. He was stronger, not because he bore the sacrifice alone, but because he finally learned to share the burden. He had saved the pack, not by being the alpha, but by becoming the mate. He finally had everything he had risked losing: